Hello. I think I'm gonna grab this, probably, unless it's stuck. There we go. I did it. Because I like to wander around, and I don't want to be stuck behind a podium. Oh, I left my phone here, so I remember to start a timer, so I had any idea how long I've been talking. That'll come up later. Hi, I'm Aldrich. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm going to talk about mental health in tech, which I think is sort of the ultimate yak shaving. If you're unfamiliar with the term of yak shaving, it's sometimes got a negative connotation, but it's really all the extra work we do around that has to get done before we can actually build the product we're trying to build. All the extra things. So dealing with like our mental health and making sure our brains work is probably key to doing cognitive creative work, I think. The problem is you don't shave yaks. That's actually bad for their coats. You're supposed to brush them. And anyway, this is a Highland cow, not a yak, so it's neither here nor there. So hi, I'm Aldrich, developer advocate at Equinix. I like putting my contact info ahead of time, so if you're like thinking of things, you can email me. I would love to talk about this directly. You can find me on Twitter at Crazy, spelled weird like it is on the screen. These slides should already be up on the speaking page, so if you want to get a copy of these slides or the resources that are linked, those should all be there at that link. If it's not, yell at me and I'll click the publish button. Before I get too far, I want to shout out to a couple of organizations. One is Equinix, because they let me come and talk about this stuff. Equinix is a digital infrastructure company that does bare metal provisioning like the cloud, but also happens to leverage these massive data center infrastructure that is all over the world and owns lots of undersea cables and can do cool multi-cloud, hybrid cloud networking stuff without touching the public internet. That's a different talk. That's not this one. Talk to me about that another time. I would love to talk about it, but not on stage right now. Open sourcing mental health is another one. They have a number of speakers who deal with mental health issues and concerns and care about it deeply and can give talks here or at your events or at your workplace. They also have a number of resources online. They've done some research into like the prevalence of mental health issues in tech, which I'll talk about briefly. But also resources for like, what accommodations is your employer required to make for you as someone who may have mental health conditions? Or what can you do as an employer, HR, or manager to accommodate other folks? So it's osmhhelp.org if you want to check them out later. Also, that link is in the resources. So I think this talk is really important because of this. Mental illness can be fatal. Depression is a deadly disease that kills people every year. It's a problem. And so I think it's important that we talk about this if we're going to actually come to solutions and, improve our lives together. So when I first, one of the earlier times I'd given this talk, it happened to be during Suicide Prevention Month, and I included these helplines, and it just seems prudent to continue to do so. If you have no one else to talk to and you're in a situation where you need help, please save these numbers somewhere. If you take pictures of no other slides, it should be this one. I'll give it a minute. And if you want specific help, Trevor Project for LGBTQ folks, broadly, Trans Lifeline, if that's your concern specifically, also have people you can talk to about this and may have like specific experience if that's something you're dealing with in your life and don't want to talk to like rando. Right, so those two important things. The next most important thing, the disclaimer. I am not a medical health professional, so these are about my experiences and what's helped me and what I've gone through, but I cannot diagnose you. This might give you something to talk to a professional about, but please don't diagnose everything and begin treatment from here. I'll also talk about depression, anxiety, and ADHD. I'm probably not gonna go like super deep and super concerning, but take care of yourself first. This is one talk, like please walk out of if you need to and take care of your health. I will not be offended if you leave in the middle of my talk. Right, so ADHD, this is what we're here to talk about. What you're missing because I couldn't get it working on my computer is the neat little animated GIF where the picture inside the skull keeps changing over and over again to lots of different things, which I thought was really good because it's a bad picture of what ADHD is. But it's what people think about, right? You think about this sort of jump from one topic to another. They're like, ooh, squirrel, ooh, shiny, oh, look at that. And it can be an aspect of what it is, but it's not really the core of ADHD. Like, that's not what the condition is. So primarily it's a dopamine deficiency, and this deals with working memory. You end up with poor working memory if you don't have enough dopamine flowing through your brain. So your short-term memory is shorter, which makes it interesting. You tend to lose stuff out of it quicker, and it affects executive function most. Like, this is the thing that doesn't work well for folks who have ADHD and are neurodiverse. This affects things like wandering attention. Now, that sounds like the condition that is ADHD, but your wandering attention is actually a part of your brain that kind of pays attention to all the background stuff, the like ice or crinkling that happens over here, like the extra sounds, like extra lights that are there. And normally, you have enough working memory, it can kind of go like, okay, this is not important to my life. I've noticed it, I can move on. Folks with ADHD tend to be like, I need to acknowledge everything specifically because a new thing can suddenly take over my brain. Wandering attention doesn't work the way it's supposed to. Impulse control, right? So this is a thing like the new exciting task suddenly fills everything I was doing. Who cares what I was doing before? I might not even remember. New thing, yay! Emotional regulation. Folks with ADHD tend to feel things like instantly and all the way. So you can immediately go from like sad to extremely happy about a new thing to extremely angry and wishing something was not a part of your life and violently. So like emotional regulation can be a problem. This can cause problems with relationships if you're, having massive swings from one strong emotion to another. That can also lead into rejection-sensitive dysphoria, which I hadn't heard about, and then when I did, I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. It's difficult to like take criticism. It's difficult to see, oh, this person cares for me and they're trying to critique this in order to make it better, and separate that from, I am a failure at everything I do and I'm unworthy of love. Because we just feel all of it at once, even though that's not the case, and it should be this mild form, you get all of it. And so like it becomes difficult to even take positive criticism. Sense of time is gone. That's why I started a stopwatch, so I had any idea how long I've been talking, because otherwise I don't. So good luck. This is supposed to be a 30-minute block. We'll see where it ends up. Hyperfocus and task switching is the other one. So this is like, it becomes really difficult to change tasks, but also super easy to like, if it tickles your brain the right way, to fall down that rabbit hole, and is where you can end up with like 5 hours of Wikipedia links to find out new things, and you learn all about like, oh, that's how a sewing machine works. I kept thinking it was like a running stitch, but it's a locking stitch and actually loops it every time it comes around. That makes sense why the bobbin is there. So anyway, I should really figure out how this router is supposed to be configured. And I think this is a really great illustration of why task switching becomes difficult for folks with ADHD. This is from Danny Donovan on Twitter and part of the like hashtag neurodiverse squad. The tasks here that each person has to do are pretty much the same thing. Like, if you ignore the first step, they're pretty easy, and they look about the same. And what someone who's neurotypical doesn't see is that first step that someone with ADHD has to overcome before they can begin the task. There's this whole activation that has to happen of their whole body to even get there. And while they're sitting there struggling with that step, they're getting the messages of, it's not that hard, just do it, you're just lazy. And then if you finally do get activated and do the task, you find out, yeah, it wasn't that hard. Look, it's only these few steps once you can get over the first one. And that starts reinforcing a lot of this message internally. Another person, Jessica McCabe of the How to ADHD YouTube channel, called it the wall of awful, which I think is a great description of this phenomenon. Everyone kind of has these things. These are the walls you build up around probably otherwise simple tasks that shouldn't be that hard to do, but they become difficult. There's this big step before it. Everyone kind of has these. Folks with ADHD tend to build more, higher, and faster. This is all that feeling that can be wrapped around like paying a bill. It should take me 5 minutes to call someone and give them my credit card number, and then it will be over. But every other bill I've ever not paid, and the late fees I remember, and dealing with, do I even have money in the bank, and having to call that and make sure I've got the right credit card, and the failure and the shame and the perceived shame of failure that might happen, all of that gets added to this first step that we have to process before we can like pick up the phone and deal with talking to humans. So there's a few ways that you naturally try to approach it. One is to stare at it. Not very helpful. You can sit there and look at it all you want and try to just like zone out, but the wall will continue to exist. You can try to go around it, but unfortunately the wall is metaphorical and infinitely wide. And the third way is the Hulk smash. Again, Danny, like these two are great at like taking these concepts and me going, oh yeah, that makes sense. Calls it coping mechanism 101, adrenaline. This is when you have like a long-term project that was due, you knew about it for 3 weeks, and then maybe 2 days before you started it, because you finally panicked
and got enough adrenaline in your system, worried about failure, that it could activate you over through that wall, and you get stuck on one detail, like, if only I can get the layout on this cover page right and get all my slide theme, it'll be perfect. And now I've spent 3 hours on that. That's 3 hours I didn't have in the first place. So now I'm gonna freak out about that again and how much time I wasted. And I will stay up for 2 days straight, and I will accomplish it, and I am a perfectionist, and my first draft is always my final draft, so I'll probably do all right. And then I will be exhausted and completely done, and I will have a new project on the plate. So that's not great. So if you notice, 2 of these methods don't work, and one of them is unhealthy. So they're not great ways to deal with your wall of awful. You'll notice they correspond to our natural stress response. One is to freeze and stare at it, one is to try and run away from it, and one is to fight our way through it. And so if you always have to activate a level of stress and trauma in your body to accomplish, like, paying your bills, not a great way to go through life. So there's a few other tactics that they get into. One is to build a door, which is great. This can shortcut things like getting my expense reports in on time, which, again, there should be good financial incentive, right? They pay me money when I turn these in, but it's still this huge administrative task I have to do. But sometimes, if I can get out of the house, maybe do it with a cup of coffee down at my favorite coffee shop, it can be okay, and I can get through this task. But the next time I have to do it, that door isn't there. I have to go build it again and go down to that coffee shop, and hopefully that doesn't become routine because it still needs to reward me enough to get through this task. The other thing you can do is just deal with it. You have to sit and climb the wall. This can be the kid that, like, kicks and screams and fights before doing their homework finally, but it took 2 hours to get there because they have to go through the emotional work of dealing with this. And if you have the skills, or with the help of, like, a therapist or someone else, you can start to build the handholds and understand where this wall is coming from and how to get through these steps. And that's really the only thing that can help you approach it over and over again, is to actually process the emotions that are around here, learn how you deal with them, how your body wants to handle them, and get through it. Right, so all this is to say, my brain is sort of naturally suited to these high-stress interrupt tasks. Like when I was dealing with on-call stuff, I'm really good at that. Neurodiverse brains are also fantastic at building complex models of systems and, like, being pretty understanding of what's happening and how things are all interacting with each other. And so dealing with the, like, pagey, immediate fire, I have to go solve this problem in a complex system. Oh, yep, I think it's this thing that's interacting and causing problems. I'm really, really good at that. It's not great to live high stress all the time and have to wake up at 2 a.m. all the time to deal with, like, pager issues. So the challenge is when I want to do other tasks like write talks for conferences, other things that are important to do but not urgent, they become really difficult to figure out where to put them in my timeline. I know it has to get done, but I can't get that emotional urgency, the adrenaline rush to be like, this is the thing I should work on now. And there's ways to work around that, but it becomes a challenge, especially if you're, again, want to do something other than respond to failure all the time. That can cause problems, right? So other things comorbid with ADHD tend to be depression and anxiety. Kind of makes sense, right? Anxiety over all these things that you know are going to be a difficult thing, and now you're stressed out about dealing with potentials that might not even exist, or the times where you don't live up to your own or other people's standards and you kind of feel entirely like a failure and depressed. This, for me, really struggled with it when I first hit college. So, cheers for more college dropout crowd. Yeah, I think it's good. It's a valid path to drop out of college and join tech. But when I went from high school, which is highly structured and, like, kind of forces you to go do the thing and do the work, and I, for better or for worse, was one of those talented and gifted kids who didn't really have to try all that hard there, and so I just sort of naturally learned, but never learned how to learn. And so when I went to a place that was like, great, use all the tools that you've learned in order to study something really challenging now, I was sort of left going, I'm sorry, what tools? And felt like a failure myself, right? I did this wrong. Maybe I'm not actually as good at this stuff as I thought. I am kind of worthless. I really retreated into myself, did not leave, like, my dorm room, dropped out of music school eventually, and thought, like, well, maybe it was the school and, like, the people I was with, so I tried a different school. I was wrong, turns out. I did not have the name for ADHD at the time or the understanding that that might be a thing I was dealing with. So having not dealt with that underlying problem, turns out it still had issues. This is a challenge with like tech work, right? Because our work is cognitive, and if our brains function differently than what people are expecting, it's difficult to like not wrap your sense of self-worth into how good of a job you can do and compare it to other people and how they can always do stuff, and sometimes you can't, but sometimes you can do it like 300%. So there's like this interesting phenomenon of the prevalence of mental illness. So this is data on the left and middle from the National Institute of Mental Health, which I never put it together. That is like the NIM of like Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of NIM. I was like, oh, that's interesting. There's your fact for today. So 5% of all people in the United States, these numbers were from, I did not write the number, but I want to say it was like 2016-ish. So take it with some grain of salt, because since 2016, I mean, you've been around for the past 6 years, right? So it may have changed since then. But at that point, about 5% of adults in the US would experience some severe form of mental health crisis, right? This is severe enough it prevents you from interacting with society, doing work, whatever that is. 20%, so 1 in 5 people in the US would experience any sort of mental health symptoms, right? They reported, yes, I had some sort of mental health condition, but maybe not enough to stop them from working. So around that same report, 42% of workers in tech reported that some encounter with mental health issues. It's kind of curious. I don't know if it's the nature of the work that attracts folks to it. I have sort of thoughts about like neurodiversity in tech work if you want to have a conversation that's different from this one. I've got lots of thoughts about that. Or if it's because work is cognitive, all of these things become prevalent, and maybe more people in the US do have mental health issues that are just not exacerbated by the type of work they do. I don't know. Interesting thoughts, though. So as I think about it, we all work on complex systems, right? So the things we build are like systems of systems. The same inputs don't always give us the same outputs. They can surprise us. We're not really dealing with like known problems anymore. Most of the stuff we actually have to solve are these weird, unknown, unforeseen consequences of the actions that we do. And that's because, for the most part, they're socio-technical systems, right? There's people involved, and the most complex parts of the systems we build are the people. And like, that kind of makes sense. If we treat complex systems a certain way and have an approach to troubleshooting and understanding them, like my thought process here is maybe we can take some of these same approaches to how we deal with humans. There's actually another friend of mine gave a great talk about, called Hacking Your Emotional API. I had to make sure I was in the right section, sorry. And so likens your emotions to an API, right? Like there's certain, you put in certain input, it processes through something, and you get an emotional output. And I was like, oh, this is a great metaphor. And one of the things he says, John Sowers says, unfortunately, your API is open, and anyone else can make calls against it. So that's something you have to deal with in life. So one of the things is observability, because you exist in production at all times. There is no staging version of you. There is no test version. You are just in production. And if testing in production, we want observability, like maybe we should do the same things for ourselves. So one of the metrics we can use to kind of judge how we're doing is our emotions. This is a feel wheel that John Sowers would hand out after that same emotional API talk. But I have ADHD, and this is a whole bunch of options for me to try and choose from. And nothing I need worse is when I'm trying to get at the core of like, hey, what's going on with me today, than spending 30 minutes trying to pick the correct word for how I'm feeling. So I like to paint in primary colors. This is called sachet check-ins. I call it that. Also other places on the internet, because it's a handy acronym, because it stands for the 6 sort of primary emotions that it's going to call out: sad, angry, scared, happy, excited, and tender. And so one of the things you can do is sort of take this moment to stop and see what's going on with you if you're having a reaction you're not expecting, and try to dig into that. I'm going to do it here because it's exciting and terrifying to do in front of a room of semi-strangers. I've done it also, you can do it on your own and like in a journal, which is useful, or you can do it with like a group of trusted friends, which is awesome and empowering to have like other people respond. Because when you're doing it that way, you just sort of get your time to talk. And the rules I've had for that are, if you are feeling and like agreeing, just you raise your hand to show like solidarity with that person. And when they're done, it's just, all right, I see you, I hear you. There's no positive or negative afterward, just like, hey, I recognize that. So anyway. I start with a deep breath and try to feel like, do a little bit of mindfulness and try to feel the sensations in my body, because I know like my emotions will show up as physical sensations sometimes before I have words for them. It might be like I can feel the kind of knotting in my stomach and my chest because I know I'm anxious, I'm scared being up on stage and trying to do like here's what I'm feeling honestly right now. This talk is always hard to do since it's so personal, so I'm always nervous and scared giving this talk. But I'm excited. I love that more mental health talks are showing up at tech events and saying like, hey, we need to talk about this. This is a thing. We need to care about humans if we're going to build systems that do good things for humans. And I always feel tender, which is, like love, but with less baggage. I always feel tender at DevOpsDays conferences because there's so many people that I know and I care about, and I get to see them in person and in 3D and not just through screens on Zoom with weird delays. So I'm really tender and excited and happy about that, and scared giving this talk. And with that, that's my check-in. Error budgets. So this is another weird thing. Like, my favorite quote about this is like, we won't run our systems at 80%, but we refuse to run our humans at any less than 100, which is absurd, right? Like, first off, we have to have elasticity and capacity, or else we will always be breaking every time something surprises us. But furthermore, like, you can have bad days, stuff can break, and that can just be okay. Right? Like, we have error budgets because weird stuff happens in our systems all of the time now. And sometimes it's a one-off anomaly and you move on and it doesn't happen again. And so why stop everything and spend hours and hours of engineering time to hunt down a problem you'll never see again? So what we care about is the trending. Are you causing consistent problems? How's your performance looking over time? Are you burning through enough of your error budget that it becomes a problem? For me, for instance, and I'll talk about it in a little bit, I have like a no zero days. Like, that's an indicator for me that there might be a problem. If I have a day where I can't do anything, I need assistance, right? I need to fire off an alert and call for help. Create that as opposed to just saying, I had a slow day or I was feeling meh. We all get mushy brain days. We have no bones days. It's okay. Blame-aware retrospectives are really important too. The shift towards blameless has caused some weird phenomena in some places where it's created like engineer-involved incidents, this resistance to attribute any action to any person, but that is not blameless, that is hiding what's happening in our systems. Blameless requires trust, and so like blame-aware is what we really want to. We want to be aware of, an incident is a great example. There may be an action that I took that directly led to the incident that happened, and even if no one blames necessarily and there are no consequences for it, there are still feelings of shame and guilt associated with that need to be dealt with if we're going to learn and move forward and like understand that and create the psychological safety we need. What we really want is sanctionless, right? Like, we don't want someone to get punished for doing a thing. That's not what we want. But blame is still a thing we kind of have to deal with. That's a whole other conversation. No root causes. Like, that's part of it too. Like, the root cause of every plane crash is gravity exists. Generally, blame and root cause is an excuse to say like, we're going to fix this one thing and therefore it will be better. And that's not true of like our systems or ourselves. Your performance is not your value. That's what all this gets at. If you haven't heard it, I said your performance is not your value. How well you do every day, whether or not you write 10x code every day, is not the value you actually bring to the company, but your perspective and who you are and how you do that and how you interact with your teams and actually get it done. That's why they've hired you. Like, if someone has hired you because you make 0% mistakes, like, that is a time bomb waiting to happen. Find another company, please. So this is what I talk about, managing work in progress. So this is what I talked about, like non-zero days. This tweet was sent out in 2017, shortly after the first DevOps Days Hartford that I organized, and definitely did way too much, and definitely followed the ADHD adrenaline coping mechanism of actually accomplishing it all. It went great, by the way. But the day afterward, I was done. Like, I had never had that level of burnout before where I could not, like, awaken myself enough energy to rise. Everything else that I had to do, suddenly as my perspective went from this laser-focused, accomplish this event, to like, oh no, here's all the stuff that was waiting in the wings, was just an overwhelming, crushing force. And so I said, okay, if I can do just one thing, what if I just had to do one thing? It's like, well, what's the first thing I have to do? Like, get out of bed. All you have to do today is get out of bed. And that'll make it a non-zero day. It's like, okay, I can probably handle that task. Getting up and getting out of bed I can probably handle. So I did that, and then I checked it off. And now I've already been successful in my day. Everything else is bonus, and that's wonderful. And so then it became like, well, what one more thing do you want to do? Like, well, I haven't showered since before the second day of a conference and an after party and then fell asleep, so I'm pretty ripe. Let's go shower. Check off one more thing. Already in bonus territory. So you might notice, it might be hard to read from there, this tweet was sent at 11:55 p.m. Those were the 3 things I had accomplished by then that day. I think I did manage to get food into my system and go back to bed, but that's okay, right? No zero, still within an error budget. We're doing okay. So here's the recap of the whole thing. So we are complex systems, just as like the computers we work on, we are systems of systems that all interplay and do weird things, and sometimes even our responses surprise us when we were expecting a certain input-output dynamic. Get you some observability. Make sure you know what's going on inside your brains. Give yourself an error budget. Give yourself the grace to use it, and remember your performance is not your value. That's one I always struggle with, and know here, but don't always know here. And especially with ADHD is very spiky performance. I can give 200% one day and then 5 the next day instead of people who might be 50 all the time. I struggle with remembering that bad days don't mean I'm a bad person. So it's an important one. And manage your work in progress, right? That's don't put too much in front of you. It gets overwhelming really quick. The whole point of this is continuous improvement. Just like DevOps, there's no congratulations, you've achieved DevOps, there is no more work to be done. Your mental health journey is the same. There's never a point, congratulations, you have achieved mental health, there's no more work. It's finished, right? This is all a process of continuous improvement. Any steps you can make are good, and there will always be steps to continue to maintain that. These are resources. That was that. So these are the resources you can find. Thanks. Oh yeah, let's talk about it in an open space. I do want to talk in an open space about it, but I also have time, I think, if there are questions, if there are any. If not, we can do a whole open space about it. Over here. Oh, do we have a mic? Blue box.
Where am I going?
So my question is for the neurodiverse folks who end up niching themselves into a weird position related to complex systems and stuff like that, and basically paint themselves into a corner in their career. How do you go about getting out of there, especially when changing jobs is so crazy scary?
I don't know. I too am stuck in the tech industry. I think that's a big discussion. I would love to talk about that more in an open space about that, because I think that is a bigger picture thing than I have the ability to answer in 5 minutes.
Really help her, just baby step at a time. So, that works.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, a little bit at a time, sure. Yeah, I think that's part of the approach, yes, for sure. Looking back in the other corner. Just chuck it. Hope for the best. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So my question is, even if someone is able to do this sort of intro work, right? They're doing the work themselves to understand themselves. Mm-hmm. A lot of tech employment spaces may not be particularly safe. And so how it's easier, not that I'm speaking from experience, to just be dead inside, right, in the workplace, right, than to sort of reveal any of this work that you've done. I don't know if you have thoughts on that, or how to go beyond just the self work to maybe the space work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it is having, this is part of why I try to have these discussions and open it up, is to try and have the conversation with more people that might be able to influence and create the psychological safety in your corners. Of course, bringing it up is dependent on your safety in your org, and not everybody has. I've been in those places, and I have dealt with that too. Part of it I would also say is the resources at open sourcing mental health one of the big things is recognizing the accommodations that some workplaces do have to make for you. So neurodiversity like ADHD, ASD are covered under things like the Americans with Disabilities Act, and there are accommodations they have to make. And so there are parts of it that suck if you're dealing with work and having to fight them to do things for you so that you can work for them. Like, that's a dumb dynamic. But that's like a place to start. And I think more of it is, yeah, if it's not safe at work as a leadership structure, it's not going to be a safe place to work because of leadership structure, and it's hard to change. All right, I think we're out of time. So I'll propose an open space on this or something we'll get done, and we can talk more and do all that stuff then.